The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
CHD Science, it's Friday the 5th of June 2026 and we're live here and we're going to go live right now to Poland where our Chief Scientific Officer Brian Hooker is. Good morning, Brian, from Poland.
Well, good morning and good afternoon. It's afternoon here. We've already had a full day, but good morning to you. And I'm enjoying the all the events here that the founders of Stop MAHA, which is an acronym for Stop Mandatory Vaccination in Polish, evidently. So we today. Well, first of all, I should say I'm being joined by Del Bigtree, who is part of a European tour that he's doing right now with this movie, An Inconvenient Study. But today they scheduled us for a parliamentary briefing. So that happened this morning. The thing that was absolutely amazing was the president of Stop MAHA, Justina Sosha, asked me to speak about vaccines and autism, and I never get to speak anymore about vaccines and autism. And so it was quite an honor to be able to talk about that. Dell had the first speaking slot, and he talked primarily about the case for no mandates and the case for health freedom and freedom of choice. And before the actual event in Parliament, then we had a press conference there, and I think there's going to be some news coverage tonight. If I spoke Polish, maybe that I would watch Polish television, but they had several film crews there and also some reporters that were asking questions, and they were friendly. So it's so far so good. It's been a really good day.
And so what is the situation in Poland versus America re vaccines? What's the deal?
Poland has a very, very aggressive draconian vaccination schedule. Not only do they give the hepatitis B shot in the first day of life, which they're one of 3 European countries that does that, but they also give the tuberculosis, the BCG vaccine, on the first day of life, it's really, the BCG vaccine was designed in the 1920s. So we have 1920s technology. Vaccines are mandatory. For a child missing one shot, the parents can be fined up to $4,000, or I think it's 10,000 zloty, which is the Polish currency. And if it's multiple vaccines, then per offense per child, they can be charged up to $15,000. And according to my hosts, Justina Sosha and Arkadiusz Tatela, who is a vaccine injury attorney here in Poland. According to my host, the authorities are becoming more aggressive about reporting the parents and possibly prosecuting the parents if the children are unvaccinated.
Brian, that is shocking.
It's horrible.
So it's injury and death.
They seem really unaware of what vaccine injury is. They have a compensation program in Poland that is, in a word, a joke. The maximum amount of payout, I believe, is 100,000 zloty. So that is essentially $25,000. So the maximum payout that you get for any vaccine, say your lifetime debilitating vaccine injury, like Billy or like Steve, that would be a $25,000 payout if they decided that it was a true vaccine injury. So I don't know how people put up with it.
Yeah, and why are they still there? But it's a poor country, isn't it, Poland?
Um, it's to me, it's actually more affluent than what I expected. There is definitely the vestiges of the persecution of the Cold War, and you see that kind of in the buildings, you see that in the attitudes of some of the people. But the people that I interacted with today are health freedom warriors. These are doctors on the front lines who have been punished multiple times through fees, sanctions, through getting having their medical license suspended. But they just keep going. They absolutely keep going, and they're being marginalized left and right by the Polish government.
So what happens now? You're going to be staying there, and you're going to be in DC for the duty to disobey and the day of whatever we're doing up there, Children's Health Defense
The
Day. But what are you doing till then? And the purpose of you being out there, and you've been traveling Europe a lot. So talk to us about that on.
Right. Well, tonight, Dell is showing the movie The Inconvenient Study, and then tomorrow at 11 o'clock Central European Time, there is a rally in Warsaw, and this is their 10th annual rally for stopping mandatory vaccines. So this is, Stop Knob's quintessential event. They're expecting about 5,000 people at the rally. I will be speaking, Dell will be speaking. They have some of the more local presence, doctors that are in the movement here, Health Freedom. Justina Soka and Arkadiusz Totela will both be speaking. And that rally, we start at the city center, and then we actually walk to the presidential palace. So hopefully we'll make some big noise. I'm excited to see these people come out. They've put up with a lot, and they don't want to put up any more. And they're very, very encouraged by MAHA. They're very, very encouraged by what's going on in the United States. And they've endured horrible circumstances. Talked to a lot of people that were at the conference today with vaccine injured children, but they just keep on standing up.
Yeah, we've got to help them though. I mean, the world has got to help them. You cannot be fining that kind of money to parents because their children are not up to date on their vaccines. I mean, it's horrific. What do people do? The unvaxxed do? What do they just hide? And how do you do
There
that?
are there are doctors that are faithful to write medical exemptions, and some of them have told me that they're currently not being persecuted, that during COVID it was horrible. There was a lot of persecution, there was a lot of fines. One doctor talked about being suspended because she prescribed an antiviral for COVID. Imagine that, fighting a virus with an antiviral. It sounds like a criminal offense to me. Um, so they continue to do the work, but they're undergoing something that is worse than what we have in the United States, and they're looking to us for assistance. So, it's really an honor to be here, to be able to help in any way, shape, or form. And they're absolutely hungry for information.
Well, whatever we can do, Brian, just tell them we're here, Children's Health Events, whatever we can do. We got to help. I have Polish blood in me, so we got to help the Polish.
Exactly, exactly. Well, I've eaten so many pierogies, even since I've been on, I've only been here for less than 24 hours. I've already had 2 meals of pierogies, and if you cut my veins, I think I would bleed pierogi. So, I feel like I have Polish blood, but no, there are a lot of opportunities for interviews. There are some doctors that are here that I would love to have on my show, doctors and scientists. So I think that we should need to continue to publicize their plight, so people know that's what's going on, that people can help out, people can spread the word, and pray big for these people. They're really going through it.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you highlighted that, so we would have no idea. Well, Brian, we'll see you. Have a safe flight back. We'll see you in DC. And
Okay.
I hope we can go live on the 10th on Good Morning CHD. I hope we can achieve that for our big
Go
day.
live on In DC.
From DC, all of us, a lot of us will be in DC.
That would be so much fun.
Nice to show people what we're doing up there. But Brian, have a safe trip back. Thank you for checking in from Poland. Give Poland our love, and and we will speak to you soon. Thank you for being on so early this morning.
All right. Thank you, Polly.
Okay, everybody, now so Claire Dooley yesterday ran out, what does it say? No, it was Wednesday. Straight after the Ron Johnson hearing, she ran out and got exclusive interviews for us, which she's edited and put together. So we're going to do that. And then we're going to go to obviously a pre-recorded science, Doctors and Scientists with Brian Hooker for that. So you'll want to stay tuned for all of this. But enjoy Claire's videos, interviews. They're exclusive to CHD.
Good morning, CHD. My name is Claire Dooley, and I'm reporting to you from the Capitol in Washington, D.C. Today is Friday, June 5th, and we're going to be giving you guys some exclusive interviews that we captured following Senator Ron Johnson's hearing on Wednesday entitled Plausible Mechanisms of COVID-19 Injections Causing Cancer and Attacks on Scientific Publications and Research. I was able to attend the hearing, and following the hearing, Senator Ron Johnson, Sabine Hazan, and Dressen agreed to do exclusive interviews with CHD TV. It's really refreshing to see a lawmaker care about this issue as much as it deserves to be cared about. So take a look at these interviews.
I'm Senator Ron Johnson, Great State of Wisconsin.
And Senator Ron Johnson, you have been holding many hearings of these sorts. Why do you think it is that you're the only senator who is doing this?
Because most of members of Congress, most doctors, most members of the federal health agencies, big pharma, media, the big networks, social media, they all pushed the COVID injection. We all wanted to see the pandemic end. I got that. But particularly when you consider the people like Peter Marks, who was head of the division within FDA, who approved the emergency use authorization for both Pfizer and Moderna. And put yourself in his position. He approves this, knows that they bypassed all kinds of safety studies to do it. Operation Warp Speed, I got that. We wanted to end the pandemic. But then he was also charged with safety surveillance. So they approved this, and then they had to be shocked as the adverse event reports were flooding into the VAERS system. I mean, there was a deluge. The contractor who loaded these reports into VAERS had to hire 290 people just to get through the backlog. So put yourself in position, Peter Marks, you've approved these injections, they're not vaccines, and now you're seeing they're causing people to die, to have serious adverse events, which, by the way, the NIH started treating people like Dressen in March of 2021. So when Peter Marks then on March 1st of 2021, less than 3 months afterwards, is briefed that the complex algorithm they were using to analyze the VAERS data was actually hiding and masking safety signals, he probably breathed a huge sigh of relief. He's going, oh, I got my answer here. We'll maintain doing this algorithm, even though they're developing a new one that will unmask these safety signals. We'll keep using this. We'll say we've got to be consistent. And then I can go to the American public and lie to them, bald face, and say, we're just not seeing safety signals. The problem is, old Dr. Anna Scharsman did more than just brief him that their algorithm was already invalid, and they were developing a new one. They developed a new algorithm that showed that the current algorithm had 49 severe cases of masking, and a new algorithm showed 25 safety signals of very severe adverse events like sudden cardiac death, pulmonary infarction, Bell's palsy, different types of strokes. And then old Dr. Scharsman continued to run data month after month after month. For 3 months, she kept showing them more safety signals. But they didn't pin a medal on her chest. They shunned her off to the side. They ordered her to cease and desist. When we interviewed her, she said, they treat her like a pest, okay? So it's not just Peter Marks, it was other senior FDA officials. They're all complicit in it. And, unfortunately, the American people believed him. And every day that goes by, that they lie to us, it's less likely they're going to be honest, because they keep compounding the lie day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, and they all do it. Well, there's member Congress that cut videos that get that jab, end the pandemic. They don't want to admit that their advocacy for these injections killed people, permanently disabled them. Doctors don't. Federal health officials don't. Stephen Colbert wouldn't want to do that. That's our problem. We have a literal global state of denial. All these other governments that relied on federal health officials, forced it on their populations. I mean, the administration mandated this. They mandated them. In complete violation, from my standpoint, of the Nuremberg Code. You can't force somebody to take medical treatment, but they did, and people died.
I didn't blame, is that the pandemic of the
unvaccinated? And he was losing patients. Yeah, we're losing patients with you guys. I mean, this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated, but the problem is your injection didn't stop transmission, and your injection killed people. It permanently disabled people. By the way, I just have to, again, I just met with some of the injection injured, Dressen, a couple other women. The injection injured are at a low point psychologically right now. They've been trying to be seen, heard, and believed so they can get treatment for now 5 years. And we made some progress, but not nearly enough. They're still being gaslit. They still can't get treatment. It's outrageous.
It's outrageous to see senators like Blumenthal just completely overlooking their pain and suffering, not even acknowledging it. How do you think that his two experts held up yesterday at the hearing compared to the experts that you brought forth?
I could not actually believe somebody. I think she's the president of the American Society of Oncology Clinicians. I think that was the name of the group. So somebody at the top of the field. And, our witnesses knew her, and very respected oncologist. The fact that she came in to testify that the injection, there's no proof of that causing cancer, but didn't know what the injection was. I mean, in her testimony, when she said that the mRNA degrades rapidly in the body, I asked her, are you of the understanding, or do you have the belief that this is true mRNA that degrades rapidly? Yeah. It's not. We've known it forever. It's modified. It's modified to not degrade. There are studies that show it circulating in the body 700 days after injection, and they just stopped the study. We probably, continuing. But they authoritatively say there is no proof. Well, it's because you're not looking for it. And where you see proof, when you see evidence, you just reject it. So on my side, we had, Angus Dalglish, we had Dr. Wafik El-Diri. I mean, these are, eminently qualified oncologists, been doing this for decades. They're seeing the evidence in their clinic. They're laying out the plausible mechanisms, and their careers are being destroyed because of it. It was a two-part hearing. It was, let's lay out the plausible mechanism for causing cancer and other adverse events. And then let's lay out the evidence of those that have the courage to lay out the truth, to expose the truth, to warn the public. They have their careers destroyed so nobody else speaks up. Nobody's going to do research on this because they'll get crushed. Their livelihood and their careers will be destroyed.
What do you think accountability looks like? You said that the vaccine injured are failing at a low point. How do we? Well,
the first step is they need an ICD code. So the medical establishment realizes this is a thing. This is a condition you can actually bill for. It's a pretty modest request, right? I hope that, the HHS under Bobby Kennedy provides that ICD code sooner rather than later. That's just first step. But it's an acknowledgement of the COVID injection injuries. Our federal health officials have to acknowledge, yes, this is a real thing. And they also have to acknowledge the corrupt actors that has allowed this to go on for 5 years without acknowledgement. Those that covered up what they knew and what they did not tell the American public. Let me make this final point, because this is what's really crystallizing in my brain. I think most Americans believe that, yeah, the FDA has to, look for safety, but, you have to have somebody kind of prove these things, right? So once approved, though, we've charged the FDA, CDC to really surveil for safety signals, right? And I think most Americans would think that you're trying to pick, just see even little signals so that you can at least warn medical establishment doctors, be on the lookout for this. After you've injected somebody, be looking for maybe increase in blood pressure or clotting, or be on the lookout for this stuff. That's not what the FDA did. The FDA switched that standard to, no, we need definitive proof that these injections caused X, Y, and Z. You're never going to get definitive proof, and you're certainly not going to get definitive proof when you close your eyes to it, when you maintain an algorithm that is covering up the safety signals. CDC, early in our investigation of this, CDC was doing what they call PRRs, proportional reporting ratios, okay, looking for disproportionate adverse events out of the data, right? And they were seeing all kinds of safety signals. You had to FOIA them. I think Epoch Times finally got these, published them. There's all, under the PRR analysis, there's all kinds of safety signals obvious to CDC. They ignored them. They told us, well, we stopped doing those because we're going to rely on a far more effective analytical tool, empirical Bayesian analysis at the FDA. Well, it's that empirical Bayesian analysis, the algorithm they used to that they knew on March 1st was going to hide safety signals. So did the officials at CDC know? They're freaking out because their analysis is showing these things. So they shunned that out. Oh, this is undependable. This is unreliable. This is noise. Literally, they said it was noisy. So we set that off the side. We're going to use a far more sophisticated, far more sensitive empirical Bayesian. They had to know. The people at the top had to know they were using a system that was going to hide mass so that they could all lie to the American public. I mean, this is outrageous. The American people deserve to know this as of March 2nd. Certainly as of March 26th, 27th. Here we are, 2026, June 4th, 2026, and they're still not acknowledging it. So my mission in life is to continue to expose this and get our federal health officials to acknowledge the harm they caused by lying to the American public.
Okay, last question. We're running out of time. What can the everyday American do to help the vaccine injured or to help you?
Acknowledge it. When you see these stories, when you see the X posting, spread it around. Use your networks. Inform more people. It's what has to happen because, again, the legacy media, they're not going to disseminate this information. So it's all about disseminate the truth. You use your email, your texting chains, use your social media accounts. Make sure that everybody is aware of our report of where there's corruption.
All right. Thank you so much, Steve Johnson.
Thank you. Appreciate what you guys do.
Yes, so I'm Dr. Sabine Hazan. I'm a research gastroenterologist in Malibu, Beverly Hills, and Ventura. I started doing clinical trials on the microbiome after having done hundreds of clinical trials for pharma. I saw an opportunity to look at the microbiome and disease and felt that it was time in my life to change my focus from pharmaceutical products to the microbiome.
And so today a big debate was this mRNA versus modified mRNA. Is that something that you can speak to? One side was saying...
Yeah, so the messenger RNA is a new technology, and it was released during COVID, as opposed to what we've heard in the media, that it was an old technology. It actually wasn't. And it's a technology that needs to be studied more to see the impact of it. We've certainly seen an impact of this messenger RNA on the microbiome, which the microbiome kind of predicts disease, in my opinion. So when you see that the messenger RNA can affect an important microbe like the bifidobacteria, which is your trillion-dollar industry of probiotics, you have to kind of ask what's going on. And, it's a signal that says maybe there might be something in the future. Could we have more neurological diseases in the future because we've destroyed the microbiome? Could we have more cancer in the future because we've destroyed the microbiome? What was interesting about today was actually meeting Dr. Alderi. and seeing that he came to the same conclusion that I was seeing in the microbiome, except with his work on P53. And also correlating with Kevin McKernan, who had also gone a different path to see the dangers of this technology. So the three of us were independent and came at it with different views as scientists, and we saw that there was a danger, that there could be problems down the road with this vaccination, and that's why we had to speak up. When you see an important microbe that helps break down food to let sugar into the cell disappear post-vaccination, you have to speak up.
Absolutely. And as Senator Johnson, asked today, about this word, definitive proof, is there definitive proof that COVID vaccines are causing cancer?
It needs to be looked at. If there's a signal, it needs to be looked at. If patients are talking about having problems, it needs to be looked at. We cannot gaslight patients that have been injured, that believe that they've been injured by the vaccine. The whole foundation of clinical trials and doing clinical trials and the ICH GCP guidelines that were created for conducting clinical trials dictate that you have to listen to the patient. And if a patient is having a side effect or a new onset of cancer after a shot, we need to pay attention to that.
Absolutely. It seems the other side kind of insists on censorship. We heard the term misinformation a lot today. Do you believe that we should be censoring?
I believe anybody should have the freedom to speak, but I believe also that we should be able to present the data comfortably. We should be allowed to publish, and especially those of us who have made an attempt and have spent a lot of money on the research to publish, that data, if it passes peer review process, needs to stay. And the fact that there are investors and non-medical scientists going after the data because it affects the price of their stock or because it affects their business, that's not okay. We need to allow physicians and scientists to publish, and it's up to the community to prove it wrong one way or another. But to retract the paper is just ridiculous. How many times in history have we seen that we were going the wrong way? Think about George Washington. When he had a virus, the treatment was to remove his blood, right? I mean, how far have we gone from that, right? In that was not the right method of treatment. So through history, if we just keep going down that rabbit hole, we're never going to fix anything. And the worst part is right now, as I said, in my testimony, is basically that, we are seeing an increase in cancer. We are seeing an increase in chronic disease, neurological diseases. We need to stop and ask, why is this happening? What is going on? Certainly in the microbiome space, we are seeing a destruction of the microbiome of humanity. And that's scary to me because that's the disappearance of humanity, period.
What does accountability look like?
Well, accountability is, making people accountable, making people, responsible for doing some acts that were nefarious. Like, for example, if there was a conflict of interest, for example, the person who basically retracted my papers and the major critic of my papers owns patents in the microbiome space. Well, that person should not be criticizing my work if she owns patents, because that's a direct conflict of interest, right? So I think if a person is about to start a business that conflicts with another business, they shouldn't have a say in the research because you're biased. So those people need to be held accountable, 100%.
In your personal opinion, what are the stakes? What are the effects of censoring science?
Well, we saw during COVID, I lost no one during the pandemic. I couldn't publish my data. I couldn't say why I lost no one. I couldn't say, well, this population needs this treatment and this population needs this treatment. And this is what the microbiome looks like long-term in a person that has survived COVID, not having COVID, not be vaccinated. So I think, it affects the public. It affects the public long-term. I think retracting papers, not allowing physicians to speak up on the research affects science, which affects every human because we're all going to be patients. No one's escaping death, but we want to try to delay it as long as possible, but we cannot delay it if we interfere with research that is protecting and preventing, certain diseases.
Last question. If you could, have a microphone and speak to every citizen in the United States, what's the one thing you would say or let them know?
Pay attention to what you are sold in the media. Pay attention, be vigilant. Just because somebody says that they got better and their microbiome is improved with this drug or this drug, ask yourself, is it good for me? Ask questions, criticize, read as much as possible. Don't trust necessarily artificial intelligence, because even artificial intelligence is flawed because they are fed data that is not necessarily the right data. So I encourage the public to be vigilant and to ask questions, and I encourage the public to become their own scientists themselves, to do their research, to go to the farmer's market and ask, how is the milk coming out, and do due diligence. You're certainly, I think that's the most important thing, in my opinion, is educating the public to be more vigilant and to question everything. And just because somebody is telling you something, just don't take it to heart. Science is about questioning the science, right? That's what it's all about. So if we can't question science, there is no science.
My name is Brianne Dressen. I am a previously healthy mother of 2 young kids, and I was a preschool teacher. I participated in the clinical trials here in the United States for the COVID vaccine and suffered a severe adverse reaction that started within an hour. Since then, I started a 501c3 registered nonprofit called React 19 that now advocates for 40,000 Americans injured by the COVID shots.
Senator Johnson always kind of mentions you at pretty much every single roundtable he does, and how, the information that you gave him and the people you connected with him with really kind of changed his view, and you can see that in the roundtable work that he does. How did that connection initially happen? I'm kind of curious. I feel like I never heard the story.
Well, it was very wild, because obviously going from being willing to participate in the clinical trials to now hanging out with Senator Ron Johnson, pushing in another direction entirely, was a wild paradigm shift for me. And unfortunately, it was because of the worst red pilling ever for me and my family. And so I was all in with the narrative and did what I was supposed to be a good girl. And when the inevitable and inconvenient injury happened, then I was kicked to the curb faster than I even knew and could understand what was going on. I was like, look, I'm injured. I'm part of the team. I was in the clinical trials. We should be investigating this and looking into this. And it just turned into a huge wake-up call for me, how quickly they will run and hide, even from the damage that they themselves cause. So Senator Johnson was the only guy that was willing to step up and listen to us. And of course, coming from the other side, all of the propaganda that I was fed was entirely untrue. But it was that he was a misinformation spreader, and he was not for public health, and that he was a dangerous man. And so it took several conversations with him to kind of start breaking down those barriers. And once I saw who he really is, we hit the ground running. I was like, okay, you want to know about the clinical trial cover-ups? Here you go. You want to know about the NIH study that was covered up? Here you go. You want to know about the researchers and the doctors that are on the front lines that are treating the patients that we see within React 19? Here you go. So it's been an amazing adventure.
What do you think is the difference between him and other senators? I kind of asked myself this, because it's like, why is he the only one doing this?
That's a good question. Why is he the only one doing this? I mean, it's we've met with almost all of the elected representatives in Washington at this point, and I can sadly say that they're just controlled by the pharmaceutical lobby. Corporate lobbies in general have done a massive disservice to the country and to the ability for just everyday citizens to be able to have their voice heard. It's all about profits and how we can better, increase those profits for these different industries. And until we get back to serving we the people, we're going to continue down this horrible path. Senator Johnson, when he ran for his last run for Senate, he called me in January and told me that the reason he was running was because of the vaccine injured, because there was nobody stepping up. And he said usually by this time in his campaigning, at this point it had been 2 years of pushing on COVID vaccine injury awareness. He said usually by this point there's 10, 15, 20 senators that are all rallying across the same cause, but in this one there was nobody. But we saw what happened to Senator Johnson. We saw how ruthless they were, and politicians, by nature are definitely not going to stick their neck out where they're going to have to commit basically political suicide, and dealing with vaccine adverse events is definitely one of those things that is a career ender.
It is a career ender, unfortunately, and I love that he kind of just stuck with it. And even today, like the hearing, going way over time it's supposed to, and he's just up there like relentless. He's like, I'm not letting this go. We're all going to talk about it. I want some of your kind of initial thoughts on the hearing. So maybe we could even hone in on Blumenthal's side, saying that even COVID vaccines can help prevent cancer, almost as like they were saying. Or it was kind of really interesting that they were just completely dismissing everything that they were saying. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, it was interesting to see the big, vast gap between the two sides. And Blumenthal, I've been sitting in on several of these hearings, and he's always the same. I've seen him sit up on that stand with victims pouring out their hearts about how, horribly they're suffering or how they lost their children. And he'll be sitting there with his head down on his phone, just fidgeting. He's totally disinterested. He's there with a specific mission in mind and a specific agenda, and it doesn't matter what the human cost is. He's doing his job that he's there to do, which is to push entirely against Senator Johnson's mission to expose the truth. His witness, unfortunately, it being a high caliber oncologist that's over a very high powered medical board for oncology, she had no idea what was actually being said, because she didn't look at the data. She just looked, it was very evident. She was just looking at exactly what, the propaganda machine was feeding her. She didn't bother looking at the real studies. She didn't even bother looking at how the studies were run. When Senator Johnson pointed out that the spike does not stay in the arm, even that was challenging for her to see. Like but it doesn't surprise us at this point, because we've seen this with every single one of the minority witnesses for every single one of these hearings that Senator Johnson has put on. They have no idea, and the reason that they have no idea is because they don't actually look, and that's how this machine works. All they have to do is just parrot safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective, and then everything else that challenges that's misinformation. That's ridiculous. Don't look at that. Because once you do look, you end up being like me, where you go from one extreme to the other. And all it takes is just getting people to actually start looking at the data.
The word misinformation was kind of thrown around a lot. Even from your perspective, let's say, you were injured by the COVID vaccine. Perhaps people could be injured because of pro-vax propaganda. Do you believe in censoring those views?
I think we should have an open very open exchange of ideas. I have no problem sitting down with someone that really does believe that the COVID vaccines prevent cancer, for example. Unless we sit down with the other side and understand their perspective, we're not going to get anywhere. But of course, being on the other side where we've all been censored, we've all been ridiculed and deplatformed and delegitimized to an extent, it's pretty easy to see that, we've got to open up that dialogue a bit and start having some honest conversations.
Last question, what do you think the everyday person, I mean, how do they mobilize? What can they do? How can they help?
So my approach on this is a little bit different. Being someone that's injured, I see both sides, right? Because I came from the one side, now over to the other side. Now, what we're exposed to as COVID vaccine injured Americans is, sadly, in the exact same day, I'll get people commenting to me that you got the shot, you deserve to die, good luck with all that suffering, peace out. And then on the other end, it's, you may be injured, but you need to shut up because you're going to prevent other people from getting the shot. You're going to kill people, right? So there's two extreme narratives there. What we aim to do is just try to figure out what it is that we all have in common. And I think Johnson actually did end up breaking that down in this hearing, because everybody agreed that they want what's best for their patients. That's the one thing that every doctor there agreed on. So if you can build on that singular agreement and then start challenging a few things slowly here and there, give your friend or your colleague one bit of information that's not, everyone's dying from this, right? Give them the question of, what if they're wrong about this? What if they are wrong about the vaccine staying in the arm? What if they're wrong? What if I give you a study to look at? Let them mull over that study. Give them some time to chew on it, because the propaganda that's been programmed into their brains is so powerful. It takes a long, slow, patient process to break apart all of those pieces that are seriously locked in. So that's usually how we start, is we validate their concerns, we validate their fears, we acknowledge that they too want what's best for their children, for their families. And if we're talking to doctors, for their patients, we acknowledge that, and we understand innately that people really do not want other people to suffer. At the core, the foundation of people is really, they're not motivated by that. They're motivated out of fear because they want to protect the people that they're serving and they're helping. So once you understand that, start breaking it apart little by little. It's a long process. I'm talking, for some people that we've been working with, it took us like 2 years to get them to finally come around, be like, okay, yep, you're right. But it's hard.
Well, I said that was the last question, but it's not. What's the what would you say is like the key takeaway from the hearing today? If somebody's not going to sit there and watch that, maybe can you explain what happened and what you think it means?
The hearing today was very powerful. It was very eye-opening. I learned a lot of things. I thought that the complex concepts that these doctors broke down in a very simple way for us to understand was really powerful. You had Dr. Sabine Hazan that was talking about the microbiome and how massively that's been modified by the spike protein in general. You had Wafik El-Diari doing what he does best, which is just really show the massive amount of data that has gone into backing him up on his views on what could be driving a rise in accelerated cancers. You also had Dr. Asim Malhotra, who brings it every time, with talking about the corruption of big pharma and big industry, and how that really does completely block our ability to make progress in several of these areas that we need to be researching. So it was very informative, and of course, just like every other hearing, Johnson brought it. It's very entertaining to watch.
Well, good morning, CHD.
Welcome. It's Friday morning, and that means it's time for Doctors and Scientists. I am your host, Dr. Brian Hooker, and we had the privilege of having a presentation by my good friend and collaborator, Jeremy Hammond, a few weeks ago, but we did not have the actual me and Jeremy in the studio. And so I went to the producers of CHD TV and said, timeout, not fair. If we're going to feature Jeremy, I at least get to talk to him some. So, anyhow, we have brought on Jeremy Hammond, such a wonderful resource. Jeremy, you have been doing this for how many years? Covering and reporting and writing and doing analysis regarding the childhood vaccination schedule, vaccine injury. I know it's a long time. I just don't know how many years.
Roughly a decade now. My son was born in 2012. And then that began my research journey, just being able to make parental decisions about vaccinations. And then kind of after a few years of doing that, like intensive research, I just had accumulated sufficient knowledge where I kind of felt morally compelled to start publicly speaking out against the systematic violation of the right to informed consent and the deceptions about vaccinations. And so I kind of started writing a little bit, probably in 2015, and probably my first couple of pieces about the topic. But by 2018, especially by 2019, pretty much my focus had shifted entirely. I used to write about foreign policy issues more, but by 2018, 2019, I pretty much was mostly focused on the vaccine issue. And then, of course, when COVID hit, speaking out against the lockdowns and the coerced mass vaccination endgame and all of the deceptions related to the lockdowns and COVID-19 vaccines. So yeah, it's been a good decade or more.
And you wrote the book, The War on Informed Consent, that is regarding the story of Dr. Paul Thomas, who's a hero of all of ours. Before we kind of dive in, tell us a little bit more about that book, that story, and how long has the book been out now?
That was 2021, August 2021.
Wow.
That it was published. Yeah.
I didn't think it was that long ago, but it's
Yeah.
You got to pick it up. It's a terrific read, and what they put Paul Thomas through. I'm sorry, I'm jumping in and I'm answering your question.
Yeah, well, what happened was essentially he started out in a group practice and then practicing medicine the way he was taught and doing the CDC schedule and all that. But he started questioning his own practices and, the rare individual who would ask himself the question, is what I'm doing instead of helping these children, is it harming them? I think it takes a rare individual to ask that question, and even rarer individual to seriously pursue the question with the intent of answering it. And his conclusion, after that journey of awakening and researching on his own, was that he couldn't continue business as usual. So he left the group practice, opened his own clinic in Portland, Oregon, and based on the principle of informed consent, where he would not push the CDC's schedule on parents. Instead, he would provide them with information that they needed to be able to make their own informed choice. And so naturally, his vaccination rates in his clinic were below the average in the state. And so the Oregon Medical Board kind of set their sights on him for that. And then, of course, he published his book, The Vaccine Friendly Plan, which put a huge target on his back, where he was proposing an alternative approach to vaccination, really focused primarily on reducing the amount of aluminum exposure. So spacing out the shots, using brands that have less aluminum instead of more, skipping shots if it didn't make sense, like the hepatitis B birth dose doesn't make sense for most children, things like this. So, the fact that he was proposing an alternative approach to the CDC's, again, just really put him, put a target on his back. And so they went after him, and they started persecuting him, and they demanded that he produce peer-reviewed evidence to support his alternative approach of respecting the right to informed consent, which he did. He and Dr. James Lyons-Weiler published a study comparing health outcomes between his variably vaccinated patients and his completely unvaccinated patients, and it was a very good study. It was very well done. It was a very impressive study, and what it showed clearly and the data just leaps off the page in their graphs, is that the unvaccinated children were by far the healthiest patients in his practice. Within days of that happening, I think it was 11 days later, the Oregon Medical Board had an emergency meeting to suspend his license on the false pretext, the transparently false pretext that he was a threat to public health. The truth being that he was a threat to the public health establishment. So my book tells his story, and it tells the story. I go through the suspension order, and I absolutely just dissect it and show beyond any reasonable doubt that it was really a witch hunt. And they make up. As an example, like one of the claims they made was that there was a boy who had developed tetanus and was hospitalized for tetanus, and they blamed that on him, even though the boy wasn't even Dr. Thomas's patient until after he got out of the hospital. And so they were just like fabricating this case against him. So it was pretty horrific. And so my book goes into details about that, as well as all the historical background of the history of vaccines. For example, how during the 90s, the CDC was exposing infants to cumulative levels of mercury in excess of the government's own safety guidelines and so on. Discussing the Wakefield study and all that. So it really packs a lot into it. It's a short read. It's not a very long book.
Right.
But it packs a lot in. Pretty much I try to give parents who might read that book pretty much everything they would need to know to really understand the controversy and how it's misconstrued in the media. And it's not about pro versus anti-vaccine. It's about pro-informed consent versus anti-informed consent. That's the real debate.
I love the way you frame that. And I want to go back to something that you talked about, especially regarding Dr. Thomas's book, The Vaccine Friendly Plan. When Secretary Kennedy started talking about the cumulative level of aluminum in vaccines, and then also looked at some of the changes that he made, ACIP, it was not him. It was ACIP recommended in the vaccination schedule, and the guidelines that were changed in the vaccination schedule. What is your take on the blowback regarding aluminum in vaccines? It seems like the sort of pro-pharma side has thrown the kitchen sink at us regarding how great aluminum adjuvants are. I mean, what is, you've seen this play out. What are your comments on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's really astounding, actually, what's happened, because like one of the things that the HHS is being sued for by the American Academy of Pediatrics, the AAP, is just a change in the schedule. They didn't remove vaccines from the schedule.
No,
they just recategorized them as like universal recommendation.
Right.
Everyone should get these shots, to talk to your doctor about the vaccine.
Right.
Which is like that ought to be the way it is with every single vaccine, that you ought to, because what the universal recommendation overlooks is that there's always a need for an individualized risk-benefit analysis. It's not logically possible for bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. or state capitals to be able to conduct a risk-benefit analysis on behalf of an entire population. It's not logically possible. I mean, you want to talk about anti-science. The universal vaccine recommendations are completely unscientific, and because they deny the need for the individualized risk-benefit analysis. And so that's really all it's called the shared decision-making category on the CDC schedule. And so they changed some of the vaccines to that category of recommendation, which is, again, like every vaccine ought to be in that category where, you should go and talk to your pediatrician about whether that's right for you and whether it makes sense for your child, conducting the risk-benefit. Because not every child is at the same risk from the diseases that the vaccines are intended to prevent, and not every child is at the same risk of injury from the vaccines. And so there's a lot of factors to consider, and only the parents have the knowledge necessary. Only the parents have that knowledge necessary to be able to make that decision in consultation with a trusted physician. Nobody in Washington or state capitals has that knowledge at all. They pretend to, and they don't. And so fundamentally, but the reaction to that, that simple common sense step of just really taking a step toward acknowledgement of the need for an individualized risk-benefit analysis, that tiny little step just resulted in such huge blowback and a lawsuit to try to stop these changes and to stay these changes to the CDC schedule. I mean, it really speaks volumes about the nature of the medical establishment and the institutionalized rejection of the right to informed consent. Because, of course, you can't have informed consent when there isn't an individualized risk-benefit analysis. And so it's really quite astonishing to me that level of blowback just for such a modest change like that. Same with the hepatitis B vaccine. They didn't remove it from the schedule. They just said, well, the birth dose, day one of birth, doesn't make sense for most children. So, we don't need to be doing that on the very first day of their lives. So they just pushed it back, the recommendation, and and then again, the establishment just went berserk about that, which again, to me, I mean, it's absolutely, in my mind, it's criminal to be recommending universally that every single infant receive a 3-dose series of an aluminum-containing vaccine starting on the first day of their lives, when most children aren't at risk of hepatitis B. And they do routine screening during pregnancy to determine if the mother is a carrier. And then, if the mother's a carrier, then, you really want to give that serious consideration. And it makes sense for parents to seriously consider that, or even possibly if there's a carrier in the household, because it's not only, placentally transferred. It can, it can transmit in the household if someone in the household is a carrier. Even it's a small risk, but that risk is there, and it does happen. But for most infants who are really not at risk at all, it just makes no sense to be even considering that vaccine for them. And so again, just the berserk reaction that has happened to, again, just modest changes. I mean, these aren't radical moves. But it's still too much for the establishment to take, because they're so locked into fundamentally rejecting, again, the right to informed consent.
When you talk about parents being the experts and parents being in the driver's seat, I couldn't agree more. We talk about this at CHD in the context of parents of special needs kids, but every parent is the individual that is spending the absolute most time with that child. And, recognizing that we heard over COVID, trust the experts. Well, we need to inform parents. By the way, you are the experts. That's the expertise that you should really trust. And, if you have questions, ask questions. If you don't understand something, stop, wait a minute, let's slow down the entire process. And, the AAP lawsuit in light of that smacks of paternalism, that really what they want is everybody to walk lockstep and do exactly what they say. We're a society that is very, very diverse. We have a very, very diverse gene pool, and it one size fits all does not work. It absolutely is a nightmare on these children that are getting the vaccination schedule, that having that foisted on them. I want you also to comment. We did a paper together. So exciting. The official title, I know that the first part is Much Ado About Nothing. It's a reanalysis of the Havid 2019 paper regarding MMR and autism. That was published in a Journal of Biotechnology and Biomedicine in 2025, I believe.
About a year ago, it was in May.
In May, yeah. What are your findings? I mean, you approached us, which it was so wonderful. We were honored to team with you, regarding this paper, and we had some input, but really it's something that you drove from the start. Reflecting on the research that the other side, and I
I guess I use that term loosely, but the pro-vaccine lobby, pro-vaccine at any cost lobby, reflecting on the quality of that research, what do you find?
The reason I kind of really focused on that particular study was because all of the studies prior to that, I mean, if you look at the IOM review and so on, that the CDC will cite as, conclusive proof that vaccines do not cause autism. You go to that page of their website, and that's their headline, right? Vaccines do not cause autism. And you look at their sources, and then you read their sources, and you see how the claim is contradicted by their own cited sources. And the IOM review in particular acknowledged the fact that, well, none of the studies that were included in its review actually considered the possibility of susceptible subpopulations of children. And so, that just leaps off the page at me. It's like, okay, so they're not testing the hypothesis, because that is the hypothesis. It's not as though there's a homogeneous risk and every child has an equal odds of a vaccination causing injury manifesting as symptoms of autism. I mean, it's known that some children are more susceptible than other children. There are susceptibilities. It could be genetic in nature, could be environmental in nature. There's environmental factors as well as genetic factors. And so when Havid et al. Came out in 2019, and all the headlines were claiming that, a huge Danish study proves once and for all that the MMR vaccine is not associated with autism, even in genetically susceptible children. That was the thing that really captured my attention. And so I just spent, incredibly long a period of time just studying that study, like poring over it, trying to understand it. And I was fortunate enough to be able to reach out to you. I spoke with Dr. James Lyons-Weiler, because I'm not a scientist and I'm not a doctor, and I don't have that background. I'm just a dad who likes to do a lot of research and share my findings with others. And so I was able to kind of get some help and some guidance and some teaching and instruction, like about the methodology and things, to be able to wrap my mind about what they were even doing in the first place. And then I started drafting a paper about it, just kind of a critical analysis of the study, drawing on some other critical articles that had been written. You wrote one, Dr. Lyons-Weiler had written one, J.B. Hanley had written an article about it. So I was just kind of pulling in all the critiques and information I could find and just trying to put it together, and as well as adding some insights of my own. Particularly, I think that my main contribution in my opinion is looking at the healthy user bias. And so this is a key factor to me, because they they claim to, there's all kinds of problems with the study that we could get into and we do in our paper, but maybe the one that I want to highlight is that they cited a Jane et al. 2015 study, which back then the media it was a similar headline saying that, the study shows that there's no increased risk of autism even with children who are genetically susceptible. But that's not what that study was designed to test. That wasn't the hypothesis they were looking at. They were looking at the hypothesis of, do parents who have an older child with autism, are they less likely to do the MMR vaccine with the younger siblings? And they found that, yes, that's true. Parents are less likely to do the MMR vaccine with the younger sibling. Why? Well, because of their experience with their older child, and they're they're considering that, well, this vaccine might cause autism in our younger child too, and they're trying to avoid that outcome. Or if they, if parents notice early signs of developmental delay or early symptoms of just developmental abnormalities, they're less likely to do the MMR vaccine. And so what happened was, it's not the case that the children who got the MMR vaccine were no more likely to develop autism than those who didn't, but rather that children who are at higher risk of autism are more likely to be pooled into the MMR unvaccinated cohort. So this is a selection bias. It's a healthy user bias in the studies that to be able to answer the question of, is the vaccine associated with an increased risk of autism, we have to control for that selection bias. And the astonishing thing to me about the Havid et al. Is that they cited that, and they actually borrowed their definition of genetic susceptibility from Jane et al. and they did nothing to control for that selection bias. And they claim that there was no difference in vaccination rates between, those at risk and those not. But I went through their data and just kind of tried to look at it in different ways, and got my calculator out and just punched some numbers. And we show in our paper how actually there's quite a lot of the data show that, yes, it looks like very strongly that there was that the children who were considered genetically susceptible were less likely to get the MMR vaccine, and they did nothing to control for that. So that was one of the things that I think I brought to the table, in addition to others' insights that we kind of incorporated into the paper.
It's so important. And when you look at sort of the laundry list of studies that came out of the CDC, that came out of Denmark, and came out of the UK in order to indemnify the MMR vaccine after the original Wakefield study came out. The HAVID study was to be, in 2019, was to be the last word. It was to be the be-all, end-all regarding the MMR vaccine and autism. But when you unwind that, then that reflects on every study that had been done previously. When I dealt with the CDC whistleblower, William Thompson, the DeStefano study that he exposed, there was no correction for the healthy user bias. And despite that fact, they saw a statistically significant signal for all children that received the MMR on time versus 36 months, for all boys, and then primarily the signal then strengthened for Black boys that received the MMR on time versus 36 months of age. And that would have strengthened, Jeremy, if they would have appropriately corrected for healthy user bias, because we did see it in that cohort as well. So it's really important that you point this out. I want you to reflect on MAHA. For lack of a better term, regarding the vaccine issue, it seems like MAHA is, and HHS currently is, in some period of radio silence. We don't know what's going on. We do know that the AAP, with their lawsuit, then there was successfully a stay on the changes through Judge Brian Murphy out of Connecticut. To me, it seemed like things are at a grinding halt. But what is your take on this? And I also have to correct you before you go into this. You're not just a dad. That, first of all, that's a contradiction of terms. If you're a dad, and by being a dad who was a concerned consumer and made decisions based on the health of their child, and really dug deep, I think of the just a dads like J.B. Handley, Neil Miller, and so many others that Just a Mom, Sally Bernard, and Lynn Redwood, who didn't necessarily have that research pedigree and background, but they did the work that nobody else would do. I mean, Jeremy, you're filling a gap because nobody else will do this type of research. And so my hat is off to you on that. Okay, long preamble. Let's talk about MAHA.
Well, thank you. That's very meaningful. I appreciate that a lot. MAHA is, my perception of it is, first of all, I want to say this, MAHA is a political campaign. It's in alignment with the Republican Party and with Donald Trump. And we can't confuse that with the grassroots health freedom movement. Right. And so in my perception, we should not be hoping or expecting any kind of top-down solution to this problem. It's always, meaningful change in society never happens because of government initiatives. It's always bottom up. It's always bottom up. And that's just, look at history. Every meaningful advancement of civilization has occurred because it became politically infeasible for states, for governments to continue and maintain the status quo. And that's because of grassroots and the people acting to make the changes. And so that needs to continue. We can't expect, Mr. Kennedy is, I think, doing the best he can in a really tricky situation where, he's got one hand tied behind his back and he's being controlled, and there's only so much he can do. And the other big point that I want to make is that, I think a lot of people have this idea that, if we can just get Kennedy into HHS and then he can fix HHS and he can fix the FDA and he can fix the CDC. And I have a different point of view about that, because I don't think they can be fixed because they're not broken. The CDC has always functioned exactly according to design. And the problem is, it doesn't really matter who you put into positions necessarily. The system takes on a life of its own. And you really can't change it. I mean, fundamentally, you're not going to change its fundamental nature. And the fundamental nature of the CDC is, and look at it this way. I always ask this question: what is its function? Is the CDC's goal to maintain a high vaccination rate among the population, or is it B, to provide people with the information that they need to be able to make an informed choice? Well, structurally, what its function is A, right? I mean, it doesn't care about people making it a choice. It just wants them to comply. It just wants their obedience. And so the policies and the information it provides are all geared towards that policy goal, not the goal of informing people to be able to, because the CDC doesn't want people to be able to make their own informed choice. And it's similar with Dr. Paul Thomas again, where his goal was a healthy childhood population. The state's goal was a high vaccination rate. Well, those two goals conflicted with each other, and Dr. Paul Thomas's data revealed that very starkly, how those are two completely different goals. And so, we just really need to kind of get the government out of the business of telling us what to do and out of the business of our health, in my opinion. I think that, the most we can do to essentially opt out and take our health into our own hands to whatever extent feasible and possible, and just keep pushing from the bottom up in the grassroots movement, and just demanding our rights and demanding respect for the right to informed consent. I think that's we all just need to keep up in the fight and not expect some top-down solution to come to us. We need to keep up the fight and keep pushing.
I couldn't agree more. This is so important that we don't abdicate. Sure, it is really, really absolutely wonderful that RFK Jr. is now Secretary Kennedy and Secretary of the HHS. Even he would say, keep up the pressure, keep doing the work. And, because he is steering something that, Jeremy, as you point out, by design, is not meant to go the direction where he is steering. So, it's a very, very difficult fight with this. I mean, we do see changes. We see incremental benefits. I think that the firing of Jeffrey Taubenberger recently was a really, we've waited for this for years. He was sort of the second in command for Tony Fauci, and was doing myriad gain of function experiments, and was in charge of researchers who were also doing so many different gain of function experiments. So there is headway. There are things that are changing, but Jeremy, it's up to us. It's up to the dads. It's up to the moms, right?
Yeah, it is. I think so. And, I'm just so grateful also to all the parents who came before me, right. And parents of vaccine injured children who spoke up, because if it wasn't for them, if it wasn't for other parents having those experiences and speaking up and speaking out and sharing their experiences and knowledge, I probably never would have been as attuned to the information I wouldn't have had that drive to spend so much time researching for myself, to be able to make an informed choice. And I'm happy to say that my son is completely unvaccinated and healthy. And so I just owed a debt of gratitude to all the parents who came before me, and doing what I'm now doing and speaking up, despite the target you place on your back, speaking out publicly against public vaccine policy. I mean, you're going to get attacked for that position. But, it was everyone who came before me that, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants here, trying to do what I can, do my part to contribute.
Where can our viewers find out more about you, find out more about your books, your writings? What's the best way to get informed regarding Jeremy Hammond's work?
Yeah, head to jeremyrhammond.com. And just sign up for my newsletters there. And as well, you can purchase my book, The War on Informed Consent. I sell copies directly. You can get a signed copy directly from me. also on my website. So it's jeremyrhammond.com.
Wonderful. Jeremy, thank you so much. And thank you for stepping up, noticing the void, and being the one that didn't say no, being the one that actually embraced this and saying yes. I can't thank you enough. Whenever I hear about healthy unvaccinated kids, it just makes my day.
Well, hey, listen, it's just an honor to be able to have this conversation with you and to have collaborated with you, not on one, but on two papers, actually. And so I really appreciate you, and thank you for having this conversation with me.
You're very welcome. And everybody have a wonderful Friday. Share this episode. You know what? Because Jeremy Hammond is an inspiration to all of you. We need more. We need more moms, we need more dads, we need more people stepping up. You may think that, oh, well, I don't have the pedigree, I don't make a difference, but you do. You absolutely do make a difference. Bring your talents to the table, share this episode, and have a great Friday.
We're live.
Okay.
Okay, tell us your name, please.
My name is Karen Williams.
And this is called shedding because you believe that you have been shed on.
Yes.
Tell us the story.
Okay, so my first instance was actually before the vax was released. I was flying back from Ireland, and maybe TMI, but I had just started my cycle before I left. But I bled for 5 weeks after that, and the day I got back I had a gallbladder attack, which I don't know whether that was related or not, but I know I've been seeing a whole lot of gallbladder removals since the vax was released amongst my friends and family. But then I was taking care of an elderly woman that in her home. I didn't leave for the first 6 months after the vax was after the vax was released. But then the first time I went out, I went into Lowe's for 5 minutes, went in, got the thing I wanted. The employees that I had contact with were, they had the masks and the gloves. And by the time I got out to the car, both my son and I had a massive headache. It progressed. I ended up with dizziness, balance issues, concentration and focus issues. And by focus, I mean, not only could I not focus on a task, but I had trouble focusing my eyes. And I'd been hearing all of these stories, about the shedding before, and I hadn't been part of it because I had been sequestered away. But so everybody had been talking about the pine needles. So I stumbled outside to find, pine needles from the yard and make myself some tea. And I was having trouble focusing my eyes, having trouble finding them. And I do herbs. I've studied edible wild plants since I was 7. So it took me way longer than it should have. And then by the next morning, I had the crippling fatigue, heart palpitations. It felt like my heart would just beat out of my chest. And then depression and anxiety. And I hadn't suffered from that in years and years and years. And this is just all overnight. And then every time, it would take 2 weeks to clear it out. Every single time I went out from then on for 2 years, exact same symptoms. And then I would have these weird, like prickly sensations that happen just in like small patches here and there all over my body. Like it would be one here and then one here and then one over there. And those are the very last symptom to clear, and they can take months to clear. And sometimes the prickly sensations will be like a itching or crawling sensation. Always day 2, I feel like I'm dying and pray that I do. I almost feel like there's a spiritual component to it. But my head feels like it's going to explode. My heart feels like it's going to pound out of my chest. And as it progressed through time, it got to where it would be skipping beats, or I would have an irregular heartbeat. And I literally feel like I'm going to die with it. And
I finally ended up going to a healing service at my best friend's church, and had them pray for me, and it took 3 times. I've had it happen twice since, but it's not every time I go out now. But it's just crippling. For 2 years, for 2 weeks I'd be in bed, too fatigued to do anything. I've quit cooking. I've quit cleaning the house. I might sweep the floor once a month. I might mop
Even
it
now?
once every 3 months. Bathing once a week. I might wash dishes once a week. I mean, it's just, I have no energy. I'm not having the crippling headaches, and I still sometimes have the heart issues, but it's not as severe. But it's just, it made my life a living hell. It's a nightmare.
You're not the first person to talk about these symptoms, so you're not alone. A lot of people talk about even when they just shake hands with someone.
Yeah.
They feel the fuzziness and their hands start tingling, and it just starts, we hear this a lot.
I'm talking, I met somebody at a Walmart parking lot to sell something on Facebook Marketplace. It wasn't there 5 minutes. He handed me the money, I handed him the item, and I left. And it's happened again. I mean, I go into the dollar store for 5 minutes to pick up a gallon of milk, and I'm in bed for 2 weeks. It's just, it's absurd. I mean, and the thing is, they knew that mRNA sheds before they released it, and they did it anyway. I mean, I've studied vaccines for over 30 years because of my childhood vaccine injury, but so I knew ahead of time, but I never expected it to be this bad. I mean, it's in effect a self-disseminating vaccine.
Is there anything else you want to add to this or tell the people?
The main things that I've done that I found that work really well is the ivermectin, which of course, is taboo, but I took the horse paste, and that would, like a pea-sized amount, and that would clear the worst of the headache.
Wait, did you actually take the Tractor Supply horse paste?
I did, yes.
Fascinating. How was that?
It tastes nasty, but within a half an hour, my headache is down to manageable.
Interesting.
And the anxiety goes down, the depression goes down, the heart rate goes back to normal. Within a half an hour, and I try only do that once a month. Because
how much you take, like a pea thing?
Just like a little pea-sized amount.
Just eat it.
Yeah.
Okay, so Children's Health Plans are not giving out medical advice.
Right.
For the dark side, get excited. This is not something that Children's Health Plans even talk about. But this is this lady's story and her right to say what makes her feel better. Viewers, you choose what's right for you. Again, Children's Health Plans not standing by this, or it's not their thoughts or whatever. Just this lady's.
The NAC is another thing that I take daily that does seem to help lessen. It doesn't get rid of it, but it does lessen symptoms. I took boron for a while. I've taken the D and the zinc and the selenium. Like I mentioned before, I've done the pine needles. And right now it is new. I mean, we're 3 years into this, but
no, we've heard from too many doctors now in the medical, white coat doctors, medical professionals saying shedding is real.
Oh, well, Pfizer.
And Pfizer, of course.
Pfizer's phase 3 trial report, page 69, and surrounding pages. I mean, they admit it. So it's not a question of whether it sheds. And they have documented secondary shedding, and then another doctor has documented tertiary shedding. So if you got the vaccine and I didn't, you could give it to me, but if somebody else hadn't got it, I could still pass it to them. So, I mean, there's no avoiding it at all. I mean, I could stay in my house and close the door, but if somebody comes and knocks on my door, I can still get it. If I get, food delivered, somebody's got to deliver it, and I'm still going to be exposed. I mean, and I don't have the health to do my garden anymore, which I've done a garden for years.
Right, someone needs to set up a shedding counselling group with advice for those that experience it. Well, look, thank you so much for sitting here. I'm so sorry for the way it affects you so badly.
Yeah, I think, possibly the fact that I had a childhood vaccine injury has predispositioned me, it's lowered my immune system, but you really don't know at this point.
No.
Yeah.
Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you very much.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.